By the time the tow notice showed up under my windshield wiper, I was already out of options. Bright orange paper. Folded once. Printed in block letters that didn't bother pretending to be polite. Final warning. I stood there in the grocery store parking lot, keys in my hand, staring at it like it might dissolve if I waited long enough. My truck was worth less than the debt attached to it, and without it, I didn't have a way to get to interviews. I wasn't getting called back for anyway. 3 months earlier, I'd been working construction outside Cedar Falls. Commercial site. Bad wiring. A fall that shouldn't have happened if the inspection reports had been honest. I landed wrong, tore something in my knee, and learned very quickly how fragile insurance covered actually is when you stop being useful. The company cut me loose. The bills didn't. By the time I saw the posting, my savings were gone. My knee still ached in the cold, and my phone had started doing that thing where the battery drops from 30% to dead in under a minute. I was sitting in my truck outside the public library, stealing Wi-Fi, when the listing refreshed on my screen. Overnight monitoring technician, flood control facility county contract. Night shift 10 p.m. 6 a.m. Immediate start $32/hour. I read it 3 times. $32 an hour for night work, no degree requirement, no experience, listed beyond basic computer literacy. The location was vague, just a county name and a P.O. box. No company logo. No HR email. Just a phone number. I called it before I could talk myself out of it. The man who answered sounded old. Not slow, exactly. Just worn down. Like his voice had been used for too many explanations he didn't believe in anymore. "You available tonight?" he asked after I told him my name. "Yes," I said. "It came out too fast." "Good. Facility's about 40 minutes west of town. Bring a valid ID. We'll handle the rest." That was it. No interview. No questions about my knee, my work history, or why I needed something that paid that well with that much urgency. The call ended before I could ask anything else. I drove west as the sun went down, past cornfields that flattened into silhouettes and wind turbines blinking red in the distance like slow, patient eyes. The road narrowed the farther I went, 2 lanes turning into one. Asphalt patched so many times, it looked like scar tissue. The facility didn't look like much when I finally found it. Concrete. Low profile. Squat and wide, like it had been pressed into the ground instead of built on top of it. A chain link fence surrounded the perimeter, and beyond that, a retention basin stretched out into darkness. No dramatic dam. No roaring water. Just stillness and the faint smell of algae and wet earth. A single light burned above the entrance. Inside, the air smelled like old paper and industrial cleaner. The kind of smell you associate with county buildings and DMV offices. Nothing dangerous, just neglected. A desk sat near the door with a clipboard and a sign-in sheet. Past that was the control room, monitors mounted in rows, a desk with 2 chairs, and a coffee maker that looked older than me. The man from the phone call was waiting. He stood when he saw me, slow and deliberate, like his joints needed convincing. Late 60s, maybe early 70s. Gray hair cropped short. Windbreaker with a county seal stitched on the chest. Government contractor energy, through and through. "You made good time," he said. "Name's Harold." He didn't shake my hand. Instead, he slid a laminated sheet across the desk toward me. "Before anything else," he said, "you read these." The sheet was a single page, typed, black text, no letterhead, just a numbered list and a title at the top. Overnight monitoring guidelines. I skimmed at first, expecting the usual safety stuff. Don't leave your post. Log readings hourly. Report equipment failures. But then I slowed down. Some of them were off. Not alarming. Just strange. One mentioned keeping certain lights off after midnight. Another specified which cameras should be checked manually and which should never be zoomed in on. There was a rule about logging water levels only when prompted by the system, even though I was supposed to be monitoring them. I looked up. These are specific, I said. Harold nodded. No smile. No reassurance. Don't worry if some of them don't make sense, he said. They're older than the building. I don't know why that stuck with me. Maybe it was the way he said it, like he wasn't joking, but also wasn't interested in explaining. Like the rules were just facts. Gravity. Weather. Things you didn't argue with. He pointed toward the chair. You sit here. Cameras loop automatically. System flags anything important. You log at the top of every hour. If something seems off, you follow the guidelines. And if I have questions, I asked. Harold was already putting on his jacket. You won't, he said. And if you do, they're probably answered on that sheet. He paused at the door. Oh. And don't take anything home. Not notes. Not screenshots. Not copies. Then he left. The door locked behind him with a solid, mechanical click. I sat there for a moment, listening to the hum of the monitors and the distant sound of water moving somewhere I couldn't see. The control room lights buzzed faintly overhead. Everything felt normal enough. Boring, even. I told myself that was a good thing. I went back to the rules, this time reading them carefully, line by line. Most of them were procedural. Dry. Bureaucratic. The kind of nonsense that grows in government buildings over decades of liability and forgotten incidents. Then I reached the last one. It was shorter than the others. No explanation. No follow-up. Just a single sentence. If the water level rises while it hasn't rained, stop logging data. I checked the monitors without thinking. Outside, the basin lay perfectly still under the moonlight. No clouds. No rain. I told myself it was just another outdated guideline. And I signed the logbook for my first shift. I told myself not to overthink the rules. That was easy to do once I stepped into the control room. It didn't look like a place where anything strange happened. It looked like a place where things were monitored, logged, forgotten, and checked again only when someone higher up needed paperwork to look clean. The room sat half buried into the earth, concrete walls thick enough to muffle sound, old government beige. The kind of color meant to calm people down by being aggressively uninteresting. Along the far wall, a row of CRT monitors hummed softly. Curved glass, slight flicker, each one labeled with black tape and faded marker. Cam 1 spillway, Cam 2 intake, Cam 3 access road, Cam 4 south gate, Cam 5 lower channel, Cam 6 basin wall. Below them, a water level console blinked green numbers against a black screen. Inches. Fractions. Historical trend lines that went back decades. A NOAA weather radio sat on a metal shelf near the desk, already tuned. Low volume. Robotic voice repeating the same forecast every few minutes. Clear skies. No precipitation. Winds calm. Government gear. Outdated, but functional. Like everything else about the job. I sat down, adjusted the chair, and pulled the laminated rules back out. Under this lighting, they looked even more boring than they had upstairs. No coffee after 2:30 a.m. Don't activate west hallway lights. Don't look at camera #6 for more than 10 seconds. Log data exactly on the hour. Nothing about demons. Nothing about curses. Nothing about danger. Just the kind of procedural nonsense you get when a building's been running longer than anyone currently employed there. Government superstition, I muttered to myself. I'd worked construction long enough to recognize it. Don't step on that plate. Don't touch that switch. Don't ask why. Someone once screwed up. A rule got written. Nobody questioned it again. I checked the clock 10:59 p.m. At exactly 11:00 I logged the readings. Water level stable. Flow rate normal. All camera feeds operational. I initialed the page and leaned back. The next couple of hours passed the way night shifts usually do, slow enough that time felt thick. Like moving through syrup. The sound of water ran beneath everything. Not loud. Not urgent. Just a distant, constant reminder that the facility existed for a reason. At midnight, I logged again. No changes. At 1:00 a.m., same thing. I did a slow walk through the facility, careful with my knee, testing weight, listening. The west hallway stayed dark, just like the rules said. It didn't feel threatening. Just unused. By 1:45, fatigue started creeping in. I poured myself a coffee and drank it carefully, watching the clock the whole time. At 2:30 exactly, I shut the machine off and rinsed the mug. See? I can follow instructions. Camera #6 sat in the lower corner of the monitor wall. Its image was grainier than the others. Static drifting like snow. The contrast pulsed slightly, like it couldn't decide what dark was supposed to look like. I glanced at it. 1 second. 2. Concrete wall. Black water. Nothing moving. I looked away. At 2:00 a.m., I logged again. Everything steady. That was when the room started to feel thinner. Not quieter. Just less full. Like the air had stretched out a little. The water noise seemed farther away. The NOAA radio paused longer between updates. I checked the time, 2:14 a.m. Probably nothing. I looked at camera #6 again briefly. The static was worse now. Not dramatically. Just enough that I noticed. I looked away. Then the console ticked. Once, the water level nudged up a fraction of an inch. I leaned forward. Another tick. Another fraction. I checked the weather radio without thinking. Clear skies, it repeated. No precipitation expected. I stood up. Outside, cameras showed the same thing. Empty sky. No clouds. No distant lightning. The clock read 2:17 a.m. The water level rose again. Slow. Steady. My hand went to the logbook automatically. Then I remembered the last rule. If the water level rises while it hasn't rained, stop logging data. The pen froze above the page. Outside, the night stayed dry. And the water kept rising. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at the numbers. The water level had risen another fraction of an inch. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just wrong. The rule was clear. If the level rose without rain, I was supposed to stop logging data. But standing there, pen hovering over the page, something in my brain resisted that instruction. Every job I'd ever worked had drilled the same instinct into me. If something changes, you document it. You don't skip entries. You don't leave gaps. Gaps get noticed. Rules or not, missing data was how you got blamed later. I told myself I'd make a note. Just one line. Just enough to show I was paying attention. I wrote the time, 2:17 a.m. Water level plus 0.3 inches. The moment I finished the last digit, the screen on the console blinked. Once. Then the number dropped back to its previous reading. I frowned and leaned closer. The logbook entry was gone, not crossed out, not smudged. Gone. The page was clean, like I'd never touched it. I flipped back a page. Still intact. Flipped forward. Blank, waiting. My pulse picked up. Okay, I thought. Digital sync glitch. Maybe the system auto-corrected. Maybe logging had to be done through the console, and not manually when certain thresholds weren't met. I tried again, 2:18 a.m. plus 0.4 inches. This time I watched the page as I wrote. The ink faded. Not instantly, just enough for me to see it drain out of the paper, like someone pulling color away with invisible fingers. In less than a second, the line vanished completely. I dropped the pen. It clattered against the desk, louder than it should have been. I sat back slowly, hands open, heart beating harder now. Not panic yet. Just confusion layered with the uncomfortable feeling of being corrected. I wasn't supposed to write that. I turned my attention to the monitors. Camera feeds still looked normal. Spillways quiet. Channels steady. Then my eyes drifted to camera #6. I didn't mean to stare. I just lingered. The static had changed. It wasn't random anymore. It pulsed, almost rhythmically, like interference syncing to something else. The water in the frame was calm. Too calm. No ripples. No reflected wind. I leaned forward, forgetting the rule entirely. The surface of the basin reflected something, but it wasn't the sky. Instead of stars, I saw movement. Shapes sliding slowly across the water's skin. Dark and vertical, like structures overhead. Like ceilings. My stomach tightened. I snapped my eyes away, suddenly very aware of how long I'd been looking. I checked the clock, 2:21 a.m. The NOAA radio crackled to life. Forecast issued April 17, 1998. I turned toward it. Expect heavy rainfall across the region, with flood warnings in effect. That didn't make sense. The date definitely didn't. I stepped closer and turned the volume up. Residents advised to avoid low-lying areas. I checked my phone. No service, but the date was clear. 20 years off. I twisted the radio dial, then turned it back to the marked frequency. The voice continued, unwavering. Historical crest levels expected by early morning. I swallowed. The console ticked again. The water level rose. I backed away from the desk and reached for the wall phone. Old beige, corded. The kind that survived power outages and budget cuts. I dialed the supervisor's number from memory. It rang. Once, twice, 5 times. No answer. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. No greeting. Just a click and silence. I hung up slowly. Something about the silence after felt heavier than the noise ever had. I turned back to the logs. Flipped through the binder. And that's when I noticed it. The gaps. Not random. Not occasional. Every logbook for the last 3 months had clean, neat entries except for one missing window. Between roughly 2:10 and 2:40 a.m. Every night. No notes. No explanations. No initials. Just nothing. Like time had been skipped. My mouth went dry. I flipped faster, heart pounding now. Different nights. Different workers' handwriting. Same absence. I looked up at the monitors again. Camera #6 flickered. Then the image shifted. The feed zoomed in. Not manually. Not smoothly. It snapped closer in a series of jerks, like someone clicking a remote too fast. The waterline filled the screen. Then went below it. The image stabilized. And there, standing beneath the surface, was a figure. Human-shaped. Still. Facing the camera, waiting. I couldn't move. The water around it didn't ripple. The figure didn't float. It just stood there, as if gravity worked differently where it was. The screen flickered once more. And the figure lifted its head. I forced myself to breathe. In through my nose, out through my mouth. The figure on camera #6 didn't move again. No waving. No drifting. Just that impossible stillness beneath the waterline. I broke eye contact first. Whatever that was. Staring at it felt like the wrong instinct. Like holding eye contact with something that didn't understand the rules of it. I turned back to the console. The water level had climbed another inch. Still no rain. Still no alerts. That was when something finally clicked. Flood control facilities don't just monitor water. They react. I'd grown up around rivers. I knew how this was supposed to work. When levels rise past a threshold, gates open. Water gets redirected. Pressure relieved. I scanned the control panel again. Spillway status, closed. Emergency release inactive. Manual override locked. My jaw tightened. I checked the historical data graphs. Normally, a spike like this would be followed by a dip. Release, stabilization, recovery. Tonight, just a straight, patient climb. The system wasn't failing. It was choosing not to respond. I pulled up the lower dam camera feeds. Camera #4 showed the gates from the outside. Massive steel structures embedded into concrete that had been poured before I was born. The gates weren't moving. No vibration. No mechanical noise. No warning lights. The water pressed against them, dark and heavy, like it was leaning in. I felt cold. I switched to the maintenance cam 1 I hadn't paid attention to before. The label was half peeled, the marker faded. Substructure restricted view. The image was murky, underwater lighting casting harsh white cones through blackness. Concrete walls disappeared downward, and then I saw the markings. At first, I thought it was debris. Algae streaks, old damage. But as the camera panned slightly, the shapes resolved into lines. Letters. Names. Carved directly into the concrete. Not etched cleanly like official signage. These were uneven. Jagged. Different depths. Different handwriting styles. Some looked rushed. Some careful. Some desperate. I leaned closer to the screen. The nearest one was still readable. Daniel Mercer. Night Shift 2012. My stomach dropped. I pulled the personnel binder from the shelf and flipped through archived rosters. Old, yellowed pages. Names of workers who'd cycled through overnight monitoring positions. There it was. Daniel Mercer. Terminated, left position unexpectedly. Another name caught my eye on the wall. Elaine Brooks. Graveyard Shift 2007. I found her too. Same note. Same phrasing. Left position unexpectedly. I scrolled the camera lower. More names. Dozens. Some partially eroded by water. Some fresh enough that the concrete dust still clung to the grooves. This wasn't vandalism. This was a record. The radio crackled again. Not static this time. A voice came through mail, calm, measured. The tone of someone reading from a list. Daniel Mercer. My blood went cold. Elaine Brooks. The radio wasn't broadcasting weather anymore. It was doing roll call. I stood frozen as the names continued. Some I recognized now. Some I didn't. But every few seconds, another matched a name on the wall. Matched a file. Matched a gap in the logs. I backed away from the monitors, suddenly aware of how enclosed the room felt. Concrete on all sides. No windows. No real exit without passing the water. The facility wasn't broken. It wasn't failing to stop floods. It wasn't designed to release water. It was designed to hold. To keep pressure contained. To keep something submerged. The water level ticked upward again. And then the radio paused. Just long enough for me to hope it was over. Then the voice spoke again. Clear. Close. Unmistakable. My name. I didn't need to hear the last name to know. The radio crackled softly afterward, like it was waiting for confirmation. And somewhere beneath the facility, beneath the concrete and the water and the carved names, something shifted. The radio stayed quiet after my name was spoken. No confirmation tone. No follow-up. Just silence. I didn't move for a long time. I stood there listening to my own breathing, counting heartbeats like that might anchor me to something real. Then the console chimed again. The water level jumped. Not a fraction this time. A full inch. I swore under my breath and turned back toward the monitors. Camera #6 was still active. Still grainy. Still wrong. I knew what the rule said. Don't look at it for more than 10 seconds. I also knew what the radio had just done. Whatever was happening here wasn't following the rules anymore. Or maybe it never had. I sat down slowly, pulled the chair closer, and fixed my eyes on camera #6. 5 seconds. The image sharpened. 6. The static thinned out, like fog burning off under sunlight. 7. The waterline wasn't a waterline at all. It was a boundary. 8. Below it wasn't darkness. It was space. Not open water. Not sediment. Not rock. A wide, hollow structure stretched downward, walls smooth and vertical, like a shaft or a chamber carved far deeper than the basin should allow. 9. Lights flickered on down there. Not installed lights. Reflections. Movement. 10. I didn't look away. The rule didn't trigger anything dramatic. No alarms. No shocks. The image just clarified. I could see them now. The figures weren't floating. They were standing. Dozens of them, arranged along the chamber walls, bodies held upright by thick, dark cables that disappeared into the concrete behind them. Anchors. Each figure was motionless, heads tilted slightly upward, mouths open just enough to suggest breathing, but no bubbles escaped. Their eyes were open, not moving, watching. I felt my stomach twist. These weren't shadows. They were people. Or what was left of them. I recognized a face. Not clearly, but enough to know it matched one of the personnel files I'd flipped through earlier. Night shift. Left position unexpectedly. The console chimed again. Another inch. My hands trembled as I grabbed the laminated rules and read them again, not like instructions, but like a script. No coffee after 2:30 a.m. Keep the body tired. Don't activate the west hallway lights. Don't let them see where the cables run. Don't look at camera #6 too long. Don't let them understand the space they're feeding. Log exactly on the hour. Keep the rhythm. Keep the schedule. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. It's not flood control, I said aloud. The room didn't respond. The water level rose again. That's when the intercom crackled. I flinched. The speaker hadn't made a sound all night. Then a voice came through. Calm. Measured. Familiar in the way authority always is. You weren't supposed to see that yet. I stood up so fast the chair skidded backward. Who is this? I demanded. A pause. Then, your supervisor. I clenched my fists. You said this place prevents floods. It does, the voice replied. Just not the kind you're thinking of. The water level ticked upward again. You're feeding it, I said. The rules, this whole schedule, its preparation. Another pause. Then maintenance. I shook my head, backing toward the door. Those people down there, they're connected to the system. They're stabilized, the supervisor corrected gently. They help distribute pressure. Pressure. I thought of the carved names. The gaps in the logs. The roll call on the radio. And when it's my turn, I asked. The intercom hummed softly. If you follow the rules, the voice said, it'll be painless. The words settled over me like cold water. The console alarm finally sounded. Not shrill. Just firm. The water level jumped again. 2 inches. Then 3. The facility groaned a deep, structural sound that vibrated through the walls and into my bones. I rushed for the door. The handle didn't turn. A red light blinked above the frame. Control room locked, automated response active. No, I said, slamming my palm against the door. The intercom clicked once more. Please remain at your station, the supervisor said. You're right on schedule. Behind me, camera #6 zoomed out on its own. The chamber below was brighter now. The anchored figures' heads tilted just slightly as one. The water surged upward, and the door sealed shut with a final, definitive click. The door didn't budge. I slammed my shoulder into it anyway. Once. Twice. The impact sent a dull ache through my bad knee, but the control room door stayed perfectly still, like it wasn't a door at all, just a suggestion shaped like one. I staggered back, breathing hard. "Emergency exit," I muttered. Every government facility had one. It was practically a law. I turned and ran down the narrow side corridor, past cabinets labeled with warnings no one ever read, past conbipes sweating condensation that hadn't been there an hour ago. The emergency exit sign glowed red at the end of the hall. I grabbed the push bar and shoved. Nothing. I hit it again harder. The door didn't resist, it ignored me. No vibration. No rattle. I pressed my forehead against the cool metal and laughed. A broken sound that didn't feel like it belonged to me. The exit had never been real. It existed because exits were supposed to exist. That's all. Behind me, the facility groaned again. Not stressed adjusting. The water level alarms cut off one by one, replaced by steady green indicators. Stabilizing. I walked back to the control room slowly, like the building might notice sudden movement. The monitors had changed. Camera #6 no longer showed just the chamber. It showed patterns. Flow paths branching off the anchored figures, dark veins running through concrete walls, spreading outward beneath the facility like roots. Each figure wasn't just held there. They were part of the system. I understood it then. Every night shift. Every rule. Every missing log. The facility didn't need someone to watch the water. It needed someone to be present. Someone conscious. Someone resisting just enough to matter. I pulled up the long-term data charts. Water levels over decades. Every major spike, every potential flood had been flattened, not eliminated. Absorbed. Each stabilization event aligned with a personnel change. A new anchor. My throat tightened. "They didn't die," I whispered. The intercom clicked on. "That's correct." The supervisor's voice sounded closer now. Not louder, nearer. They transitioned. I clenched my fists. "Into what?" "Load-bearing infrastructure," he said calmly. I laughed again. "You turned people into sandbags." There was a pause. "Then, that's a very emotional way to describe it." I turned back to camera #6. The figures beneath the water didn't struggle, didn't thrash. They stood, eyes open, mouths parted slightly as if listening. Waiting. "How many does it take?" I asked quietly. "To keep the levels stable." Another pause. "Depends on the season." The words settled over me like weight. I moved toward the maintenance terminal, the one no one used anymore. It still worked. I typed in my employee ID. The system accepted it immediately. A new file opened. Anchor assignment pending. Below it was an image. Concrete wall. Fresh carving. My name. Perfectly cut. Clean edges. No erosion. Like it had been waiting. My hands shook so badly I had to grip the desk to stay upright. "You carved it already?" I said. "We prepare in advance," the supervisor replied. "Emergencies don't allow for delays." I turned toward the speaker. "So that's it. I just stand there." "There's a process," he said. "You'll feel pressure at first. Disorientation. Then stabilization. And if I refuse?" The supervisor didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched. Then the NOAA radio crackled. Not a forecast. Not a roll call. Rain. Actual rain. Heavy drops hammering concrete. The first I'd heard since I arrived. My breath caught. Outside cameras lit up with movement. Clouds rolling in fast. Black and low. Wind bending scrub grass flat. The console alarms flared to life. Water levels surged. Not inches. Feet. The facility shuddered. "That's not possible," I said. "It hasn't rained like that here in years." The supervisor's voice lost something then. Not calm. Confidence. "Extreme events are becoming more frequent. The chamber beneath the water glowed brighter. The anchored figures stiffened. Some of them twitched. The system needed help. Needed balance. "You don't stop floods," the supervisor said, voice firm again. "You become the reason they don't happen." The rain intensified, drumming like fists on the roof. The water climbed faster than the system could compensate. Camera #6 zoomed in on the chamber. An empty space had opened. A gap. Waiting. The alarms screamed now. I stood there, soaked in cold sweat, staring at my name carved into concrete that shouldn't have existed. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the facility waited. And somewhere beneath my feet, the water rose to meet me. The storm didn't sound natural anymore. Rain hammered the roof in dense, uneven waves, like something was testing the structure, rather than weather passing through. The outside cameras showed water racing through channels that hadn't carried flow in years. Sirens wailed faintly somewhere beyond the perimeter fence. Town alerts, not facility alarms. I knew what that meant. If I left, the system would fail. If the system failed, the town downstream would flood. Homes. Roads. People sleeping, unaware. I pressed my hands flat against the control desk, knuckles white. "And if I stay," I said aloud, "I become part of it." The intercom stayed silent this time. No reassurance. No correction. Just waiting. I stared at camera #6 again. The chamber below pulsed softly, like a lung drawing breath. The gap beneath the waterline waited patiently, shaped exactly like a human body. My body. I thought about the men and women anchored there. How none of them looked like they were screaming. How calm they appeared. Preserved. Useful. "No," I said. Not loudly. Not bravely. Just firmly. I wasn't choosing between myself and the town. I was choosing whether this thing got to keep eating. I moved before I could second-guess myself. The maintenance terminal still accepted input. I pulled up the system architecture, layers of outdated software stacked on top of emergency patches, workarounds, and undocumented overrides. It was a mess. A government mess. Which meant it had weaknesses. I started with the logs. Every record. Every timestamp. Every personnel note. Delete. The system hesitated, then accepted the command. Warnings bloomed across the screen. Data integrity compromised. Historical baseline lost. Good. I moved to the sensors next. Water level calibration. Flow prediction models. Pressure thresholds. I disabled them one by one. The alarms screamed. The facility shook, not violently but confused. Like a machine losing rhythm. The water level spiked. Then suddenly dropped. Feet vanished from the readings. The outside cameras showed channels emptying fast. Too fast. Water pulled back like it was being drained by something far below the system's understanding. I stumbled back, heart pounding. "What did you do?" The supervisor demanded over the intercom. For the first time, there was fear in his voice. "You said it feeds on structure," I said. "On schedules. On predictability." The chamber beneath the water flickered on camera #6. The anchored figures jerked just slightly as the cables slackened. So I took that away. The rain outside slowed, then stopped. Silence fell hard and sudden. The water level dropped back to baseline, then lower. The alarms cut out one by one. Green indicators returned across the console. Stabilized. I laughed. A real laugh this time. Shaky, disbelieving, but alive. "I'm not staying," I said. "And I'm not replacing anyone." The intercom crackled once. Then went dead. The lights steadied. The doors unlocked with a soft, almost polite click. I didn't wait. I ran. Out through the main exit. Past the perimeter fence. Toward my car, parked exactly where I'd left it. The sky was pale with early morning light. No clouds. No rain. I drove until the facility disappeared behind a low rise, then pulled over and sat there, shaking, watching the sun climb. For a long time, nothing happened. Eventually, exhaustion won. When I woke, full daylight filled the world. Birds chirped. The radio in my car played a morning talk show. I drove back toward the facility slowly, half expecting it to be gone. It wasn't. The flood control center sat exactly as it had before. Clean. Quiet. Ordinary. No alarms. No storm damage. No sign anything had ever gone wrong. A county truck pulled into the lot as I watched. 2 workers stepped out, coffee cups in hand, laughing about something mundane. They went inside. The door closed behind them. And for the first time since the storm began, I felt truly afraid. Because if everything looked normal, then something had adapted. I didn't go back inside. I watched from the road as the county workers moved around the facility, unlocking doors, flipping switches, laughing like people who had slept through a storm that never quite reached them. The town below was dry. Streets intact. Houses untouched. No mudlines on walls. No emergency crews pumping basements. By every measurable standard, the system had worked. I got into my car and shut the door. The sound felt too loud in the quiet morning. I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead, waiting for my heart to slow down. It didn't. Something felt misaligned. I glanced up at the rearview mirror and froze. My eyes looked wrong. Not bloodshot. Not glowing. Just deeper. Like the whites had dulled slightly, as if light didn't reflect the same way anymore. When I blinked, there was a delay not in my vision, but in the reflection. A fraction of a second where the person in the mirror lagged behind me. I turned my head. The reflection followed. Late. I swallowed and looked away. Get it together, I muttered. I started the engine. The dashboard lit up, and for just a moment, before switching to the normal display, the screen flickered. Numbers. Water levels. Inches. Fractions. Baseline. Stable. The car radio clicked on automatically. Static. Then a familiar voice. NOAA calm. Neutral cadence filled the cabin. Flood advisory lifted. Conditions stable across the region. I exhaled. Then the tone shifted. Not weather. Not an alert. An announcement. New overnight operator needed, the voice said evenly. Experience not required. Immediate placement available. My hands tightened on the wheel. I turned the radio off. It turned itself back on. Facility requires continuous overnight monitoring. I put the car in drive and pulled onto the road. As I passed the facility, I saw it, a fresh sign near the entrance. White background. Black lettering. Help wanted. Overnight shift. No interview required. Below it, in smaller print, flood levels remain stable. I drove faster. The town disappeared behind me. The road stretched out, dry and ordinary, leading back toward highways and cities, and people who would never know how close they'd come to waking up underwater. The radio stayed quiet after that. But every now and then, just for a second, I swear I could hear water moving beneath the static. Not rising. Not flooding. Just circulating. Keeping pressure where it belonged. I didn't break the system. I just proved it could adapt. And somewhere, tonight or tomorrow, someone else will take a job they don't fully understand. They'll follow the rules. They'll keep the levels stable. Because not everyone gets eaten. Some people are kept. So the world can keep working.